Welcome back to the Football Fitness Federation podcast. This is episode 206, and I'm delighted to welcome onto the podcast today Ronan Kavanagh. Ronan, how are we?
Yeah, not too bad, you?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. We've got a lot to cover in this one. Let's dive in. You can see anyone that's on video will be able to get a little inkling into one of Ronan's current roles at the moment. I'm sure we'll go into that in a second. But mate, give us a little bit of background on yourself.
Yeah, so I obviously did my uni, did sports and exercise science in UL back in Ireland. Did that, obviously it's a 4-year degree back in Ireland. Did that, went working with Stat Sports then up in Dundalk, was doing all the GPS stuff for them. After a period of time, then they started sending me out to clubs, doing bits and pieces, went out to loads of different clubs. And like that was actually a really good experience because it's almost like you're paid to kind of network, you know what I mean? You go around, you dive into different clubs, you meet new people, and then so I'm still chatting to people now I met when I was working at Stat Sports. Then through Stat Sports, I got placed in with the Welsh FA, and I've been doing that kind of for the past almost 10 years. So you basically sports science support, that sort of thing. Then through the Wales gig, I ended up getting a gig at Preston. Again, just through people you meet from doing the Wales stuff. Was at Preston for 18 months, then went to Burnley. Was at Burnley for 6 years. And then last November, I got the head of academy performance job at Forest.
Brilliant. Any Preston fans listening, apologies about the Preston to Burnley connection.
I'll tell you one, yeah.
Brilliant, mate. Well, let's get into it. So one thing I wanted to start or kick us off with is how your approach differs from club to country. So what jumps out to you when we talk about
that? It's kind of changed a bit over the years. I remember when I started at Burnley and I was kind of heavily kind of GPS and numbers led, and it's like you get caught up in your own little bubbles, don't you? So I remember like talking to players or talking to international staff when we were sending players away, and we're like, well, we'd really only like the player to do this amount, or we'd like him to do this, or can you look after him here? And it's like, you know, you kind of expect that, but at the same time then with my international hat on, you're a little bit like, well, actually we need them to do what they need to do in order to play the game. And it's like, it's hard because you're like, from a club point of view, as much as the player wants to, you're a little bit like at the club point of view, well, we need him to play our games. And then the international break from a club point of view is almost an inconvenience. But then when you're international, you can't wait to get into the international camp and get your hands on the boys and do a little bit. In terms of like my philosophy and how it's different, obviously you have non-negotiables and stuff when you're coaching the lads. You like them to hit some peak velocity stuff. You like them to do, you know, maybe a small space day followed by a big space day and then taper into the game. It's a lot different at international because in general you get the lads on it. Like this week, as an example, we got the lads yesterday. Most of them are on a second day recovery. You don't want to take any kind of big risks with them because number one, they're not your players, and number two, you've got a game in where we're on -2 already. So our -3 was kind of a second day recovery. So our -2 automatically becomes a little bit bigger because what you end up with is you need to do some bigger tactical stuff. You either do it on the day when they're probably not optimally recovered, or you do it on the day that might be a little bit too close to the game. So that's like a catch-22, but you have to do it somewhere, and we in general tend to do it on the -2. And then your -1 is a -1 probably regardless of where you are. And that's pretty much it. It's definitely a much more aggressive approach when you're in clubland, particularly in like academy settings, because you want to get after them, you want to develop them, you want them to know, no, we can go beyond this, we can kind of kick on a little bit. Like, so as an example, when I went into Forest, we do like a lot of tempo running stuff on the -2 when we need to, just to get a good volume of high speed running. Obviously good for hamstring health and everything else. But what you end up with is you end up with quite high volumes on the -2, whereas some people see it and they go, Jesus, that's a lot. But like if you get it in the right way and get your work to rest ratio right, the boys don't have any additional soreness going into it, stuff like that. So you're kind of okay. So you're able to get a little bit more work into them on the -2.
Yeah, brill. And what about when you're in the Wales camp? What about dealing with the individuals? So there's obviously going to be some boys, I'm guessing now, after that amount of time, you know him pretty well. But when players are coming from various clubs and you maybe not getting, you don't have to name names, but not getting as much information as you might like, how easy is it then to get the right work into them at the right time?
To be fair, clubs are now, like, I remember when I started, it was a little bit of a guessing game, but now clubs are really good at just getting across. I mean, when I started, like some clubs weren't using GPS all that well, and it was like you were getting bits and pieces. I mean, bear in mind, because we cover a broad spectrum of where people are coming from, some of the League One lads at the time mightn't have had GPS, you know what I mean? Yeah. So it's like, yeah, but it's way better now. We send out the forms, basically asking for a couple of weeks worth of data, like everyone does now. You get that in, you find out where their big hits are, but like I say, we're literally just recovering and then kind of tapering into the games. You know, Struds here is big on the recovery aspect and making sure the boys recover properly, to make sure they can kind of go again. And that's the same, because what's kind of changed is previously when you used to have friendlies that you kind of had or didn't have to play, we'd get away with it because we wouldn't have a friendly. So we just do one qualifier and then you could do a nice 4-day lead in and it'd be spot on. But now the Nations League means there's games you have to play. So that changes it, because now it becomes recover, go again, use the squad as best you can. But previously when I first started, we were like, no, we won't do a friendly. We'll have a 4-day lead in and really prep them, and then obviously recover from the game and go again after that. But you had a much better training block just because you were afforded more time because you didn't need the friendlies.
Yeah. And what you just mentioned there about the recovery being a key sort of focus, obviously is in the club setting as well, and will be definitely this season. What sort of strategy to take with that, with the boys at Wales?
I mean, we've over the years we've done loads of different bits and pieces. We've had the cryo in, we've got cryo in. I mean, in general, it's a lot of soft tissue stuff. They spend a lot of time with the medics. We kind of blitz them with as much nutrition interventions as we can, and that's pretty much it. That's pretty much standard across the board. I don't think we're doing anything too off the wall. I know the RFU have let us use their cryo a couple of times as well, and we've had a really short turnaround. But then COVID kind of changed that because you couldn't get enough bodies into the chamber for it to be worth your while. But yeah, just in general, making sure the lads sleep properly, making sure they're fueled properly and stuff like that, and we're kind of okay with it.
I'm guessing with a squad like that now, the boys are pretty much set on which strategies they're going to go with anyway.
Yeah, they all know exactly what they're doing. Some of them like to get some soft tissue work. Some of them like to just spend time in the game ready. Some like to spend a little bit longer in the beds. Some get into the pool. Some do the ice baths. Some don't. And it's like, we don't have them for long enough to try and get like a real cultural change where you're trying to drag people into the ice bath, because I think you can potentially lose them that way. You can coax them in a little bit, but it's like, if you start making people do stuff, I think that's where you can lose them. You can convince them, yeah, but you know, making stuff more forceful, I think, can make you. It's knowing the right time when to push and when not to, I think.
Yeah. And what's interesting, I suppose, is that comparison between both your roles, because obviously that being the first team environment and then the academy environment, is that different? If we take recovery, for example, obviously the players at Forest are in much more of a developmental phase of their career. So does your approach to like recovery strategies, for example, differ? Is it more about educating at that point rather than just supporting it at first team level?
Yeah, 100%. And you kind of have to make them do it, because like it's like with the younger ones you have to, because you're trying to go, no lads, this is, you're educating them, you're saying this is beneficial, you'll feel better for having done it.
Yeah,
it's like it's a bit of a mad one for me at the moment, because you're dealing with lads that you're trying to get through, and you're trying to educate and develop and get them to be the best they can be. And then on the other ones, you're dealing with more seasoned pros who know what works for them.
yeah.
So it is interesting, and it's a varied experience, and it's good. But it's like, yeah, it's a tricky one. But you're much more kind of direct in your approach with the academy boys and said, no, look, you have to do it. This is why you're doing it. And to be fair, it works, because the academy boys know where they're at, and they understand they need to learn, and they understand they need to do it this way, and they need to learn.
They've also, I suppose, not had the scope and experience to develop those own strategies yet, have they? Like they are still at that level.
Yeah, exactly that. And sometimes then it comes down to facilities a little bit, and like, for example, at Burnley we had a cryo and everything else, but we don't have that at Forest, and you're just trying to not mix and match, but adapt and work with what you've got a little bit. You know what I mean? We don't have a huge supply of game readies and stuff like that, like we do at Wales. You know what I mean? So stuff like that, and just players kind of finding their own way a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to focus this episode on the process of building youth players to not only just high performers, but elite performers, elite level performers, elite level players. And one thing, obviously, within that process is this transition. And I know it's very much a crossover, not a straightforward transition from one to the other, but from development focus to performance focus. So how has that worked in the role? How does that inform your practice?
Yeah, it's a hard one, because like obviously I would say we do quite high volumes at Forest. We do high volumes of total distance, high volumes of work. Again, same in the gym as well. We're quite aggressive with them in the gym. And it's like sometimes, and this was the same at Burnley, by the way, you have a setup where players are going, again, probably from a high structure environment, to then going into the first team where it's all about the starting 11 on Saturday. And because in general, when they're needed to go up, it's for 11v11, or it's a numbers issue. You know what I mean? So they're needed as a body to go up. So it's like they go up and they do stuff, and technically it's more demanding with the first team, and tactically it's more demanding. We like to say that potentially physically they'll be okay, because they've done way more down with the academy. So like, and I actually did some research with that at Burnley, where we compared weekly loads for 1 and 2 game weeks between first team and academy. And what we found was the thing that best probably prepared academy players for first team demands was when they played 2 game weeks. So that was quite interesting from our point of view. As well as that, we compared weekly loads, and sometimes we found that stuff like high speed running might be quite similar, total distance might be quite similar, and your generic sprint distance might be quite similar. But when you start to individualize it, like distance above MAS or time above MAS, that was actually significantly different between the first team and the academy. So the first team were doing more.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the academy might have been doing more sprint distance, if I remember correctly. So stuff like that, where you actually go, right, well, when you look at the generic figures, they're doing the same, but when you individualize it based on their own physical capacities, the loads look slightly different. So it's just kind of managing that a little bit and doing the best you can. In terms of the transition, then it's kind of picking up the pieces when they come back from being with the first team, and making sure probably that the loading is at least consistent. You know what I mean? And I'm not a big one for chasing numbers either. I don't like the idea of going, right, he has to do 40k this week, or he has to do you know, 2,000 meters high speed running. And it's like, well, no, because if you high speed run to a good level, if you get your work to rest ratios right in the football, or if you get your work to rest ratios right in the conditioning, you can probably still get an aerobic stimulus without covering huge amounts of distance. High speed running, again, if you can tax those energy systems properly, you're in a better place than just covering huge volumes of high speed running. And then are you getting enough peak speed exposures in during the week? And they're kind of your non-negotiables in terms of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, no, it's interesting, isn't it? Because that's a real key time for players when they're between squads, I suppose, isn't it? When they're stepping up to first team, but not fully first team squad members at that point.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's where that data becomes important. But like you say, not to lean on it too much, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And what we ended up doing with Burnley was we actually had someone whose part of their role was to keep an eye on the data for the lads in that transition period and top them up as they saw fit, or, you know, ease off them. Like, in general, it didn't need easing off, because the player would end up being up there for 11v11 or something, and then coming away or warming up and doing a little bit of shape, and then coming away, but making sure that they still got a decent hit depending on what day of the week they were in their periodization before they went into their game, and making sure they didn't miss out on a hit or miss out on some conditioning or whatever.
Yeah. So you mentioned about the 2-game weeks looking like our best prepares players. Is there anything else that jumps out in terms of getting players ready for that first team environment?
No, I'm trying to think. Like, I mean, we've had lads go up, and then when they come back, they're visibly sharper, having trained with the first team. And it's like, you know, training's not the same, because, you know, we've had it before, and I've spoke to other people, and it's like, oh, well, the meters per minute, as an example, isn't as high at academy level within training, but that's because it's developmental. There's more coaching going on, you know what I mean? So you do have to potentially stop it more, or coaches have to stop it more. In terms of preparing them beyond that, no, I don't. I think, and Warren Joyce at Forest is a big kind of advocate of this, is where, you know, you tax them physically, so when they go up to the first team, it's easy, so they don't need to worry about any golfing physicality, so they go up and they can just concentrate on more technical and tactical stuff. And I do, yeah, I agree with them to a point, but you definitely want to send the boys up as a physical animal. And we always had it, even at Preston, when the young boys come up, they'd be top of the running in pre-season, and that's kind of what you want. You want them to be chomping at the bit a little bit, and you want them to be pushing it on.
In terms of that physicality as well, I know different clubs take different approaches to this, and it'll be interesting to see what you've seen. But this is where the loan market is used quite a lot, isn't it, as well? Especially younger academy players going out to lower league clubs. Is that something that the club look to do, or if you've had any experience with that?
Yeah, the Forest so far, touch wood, this season it's been successful. We've got 2 lads out on loan at Mansfield who are playing now and doing really well. We've got another at Reading, we've got another at Carlisle, and it's hard, because those players go and they play games and they're doing really well, and that's 100% the best thing for them. And then, yeah, your 21s then are obviously probably a little bit weaker, because those strong players have gone to play, obviously, men's football. But I think it's still those players that are away need that challenge, and then I suppose the players that are left who are a little bit younger now need that challenge to step up to the 21s and go and compete at that level. So it's definitely, like, I mean, from my point of view, from a physical point of view, it's definitely the best approach, because you get 21s footy and what it's like, but then obviously men's footy in League 2 and League 1 is obviously a different kettle of fish altogether. And then you add that with stuff like just the density of games and the amount of times they have to go Saturday, Tuesday, and get them used to that, which is, like we said, it's those 2 game weeks, just exposing players to 2 game weeks. I'm sure I saw, it might have been, I saw Eric Ramsey present a similar thing, just talked about getting players games when he was at Chelsea, just getting players 2 game weeks and trying to get the young players to cover the same kind of demands or expose them to the same demands as the first team players. So it was like getting people like, I mean, getting people to cover or play the same amount of games as what their first team boys are playing. And I thought that was really interesting in terms of developing players and just getting them used to that. Because at the end of the day, it's playing games is what you need to expose them to. And people say, like, people go through it and it's like, oh, well, we need to make sure they're topped up from, just from a numbers point of view. And I'm like, well, actually, potentially the bigger problem is they could be missing out on a games program. And like the game is the teacher, in it. The game is where you're going to get, the vast majority of your experience in your development.
I suppose just jumping back to what you're talking about, Warren Joyce, his perspective in the academy as well, what you just mentioned about 23s players going out on loan, basically freeing up places in that squad, younger players stepping in, that kind of fits in line with the philosophy anyway then, doesn't it? Because we're then stressing those players even more, getting them ready for that step up again.
Yeah. And it's getting that our coaches, like, they'll call it like a challenge point, and is the challenge point right? And all that, and it's kind of making sure that's right, making sure it's not too difficult, making sure and it's finding a sweet spot with it, you know what I mean, where you've got just enough of a challenge, but you give them the opportunity to improve and develop with it as well.
This is where I suppose it's case by case, isn't it? It's individual basis. And then as I know this isn't necessarily in the job description, but I suppose that's where the type of loan comes in as well, isn't it? What level they go to, what maybe even what style of play that team are then going to go and play, what league they're in, all the rest of it.
Yeah, 100%. That's actually a big part of it. And again, it's probably above my pay grade, but the academy manager goes into that detail and it's like, right, well, do we think that one would be right? Yeah, well, this is how we play. This is what we're thinking. This is what they're saying. And it just fits, and you kind of ask around, and like some people have worked at various places and it's like, yeah, I know, yeah, it'll be good for them, because you need to know the player, you need to know where they're going, you need to know what they're like, you need to know what the manager, the coaches are like, or what some of the players are like. And because for every good loan you see out there, there's a couple of bad ones as well. So it's like, but when you do get it right, it can be unbelievable. It can, like, you can just see a player just go bang, bang, bang.
Yeah, you hear about all the successful ones, don't you? People sort of sweep the others under the carpet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but to be fair, at Forest, they've had some really successful ones over the years. I mean, before I got there or anything, it was just and they just stayed with more. It depends. Some players break in early, other ones have significant loans. Some break in early and then go on a significant loan. And it's just finding what works, I think. And I do think, you can have the best laid plans, but it's rolling with the punches, and it's opportunities, and it's everything else.
How does your role change when the players are out on loan? So if you've got an under 23s out on loan, like what sort of support do you give to them? Or is it a case of just staying in touch with the coach at the relevant club?
Yeah, it's staying in touch. So Kieran Berry, who looks after the 21s for us now, he liaises with the fitness coaches there and just gets eyes on their data. It goes into our spreadsheet, and then you can just compare and keep an eye on and make sure lads are doing the same. And if they're not, then he'll either touch base with the lads or touch base with the fitness coach saying, what do you think? I mean, I was very much before I came here, it was very much, right, well, he's in your program now, you look after him, because you can't babysit him forever. But at the same time, you do need to keep an eye on it. It's our job to be aware of what's going on with him. But like I said, there probably isn't a huge variation in what everyone's doing. You know what I mean? Particularly, they probably have a Wednesday and a Sunday off, apart from maybe a couple, and then you kind of, the training kind of just fits week. That's the way we operated at Burnley, where Tuesday was your working day, you were off on Wednesday, you had your Thursday and Friday, and then played on Saturday, off Sunday, Monday, second day recovery. And that, like, because we used to talk about stuff like, you know, when you're looking at weekly loads, we were starting like a Monday and finishing on a Sunday, and it's like, oh well, maybe we should start on a Wednesday and finish on a Thursday or whatever. And it's like, well, I said, you actually can't change any of the days. We're working out on a Tuesday. You can't put any more into the Tuesday, really. Thursday, we're tapering into the game. Friday's a -1. Monday, you're recovering. So it's like, you know, manipulating those when you can't really. Yeah, for the sake of it a wee bit.
Yeah. Just a bit of a change in topic, but I thought I'd get your experiences, opinions on it. Biobanding, is it anything that you've looked to do in the academy that they've had experience with? What's your thoughts?
I know Lewis Birchall at Forest, who's looking after our 9s to 16s. He's been toying with it. Obviously, you have your early and late maturers and stuff like that. And we had a biobanding month last season, which I think went pretty well. In terms of that, it was like what he's done as well is he gives testing data based off chronological and biological age. So that's been really useful, and the coaches really like that, because it just kind of gives them a little bit more information, obviously physically where players are at, and if you can push them or if you probably shouldn't push them. And as well as that, yeah, it just shows you who you potentially need to be more patient with. I will say it does tend to fit, like we said before, it does tend to fit the coach's narrative, because if it's a really small, good technical player, coaches are going to want to give him more time, and the biobanding or the maturation data kind of backs that up, which is fine, because a lot of the times it is beneficial just to give a little bit more time to the smaller technical ones. But beyond that, I've not got a huge amount on it. I know we've been patient with a few over the years. Again, even before I got there, it was just being patient and waiting for players to develop, and then ended up. There's been quite a few success stories at Forest from that, I think.
It's an interesting area, isn't it? Because some clubs are going pretty heavily in on it.
Yeah.
And then, like when we spoke to John McEwen up at Liverpool, at the Liverpool event, but from Everton, he basically said they did it for a period, but knew the club weren't really going to sort of fully adapt that approach. So then, not that it gets dropped, but it's not going to be the priority. So it's different how different clubs are going about it.
Yeah, 100%. And it's like, yeah, again, it's down to the preference of the club. It's the coaches, and it's like anything with players and everything. I'm worried that we're starting to get like too technical, and I'm starting to sound like a coach here as opposed to a fitness coach. But it's like there's so many different kind of contributing factors to it. Like it is going to be hard to manage, and it's not going to get any easier, I don't think. It's one of them where a lot of it is dealing with kind of experience and feel and everything else, because people try to put data into everything and try and make data answer everything, when like it just can't. It's too multifactorial.
Yeah, 100%. Just finally on that point, going back probably quite a few years now, you hear a lot of conversations with technical coaches in that decision sort of phase with players that would be asking questions around data, and that probably inform a lot of decisions on whether contracts were dished out or not. Do you see that generally there's been a change with that? Is bigger picture sort of being looked at a little bit more now, or is that still similar?
Yeah, I think so. It's like it's one of them where the data only probably serves to add a bit more depth to the decision you were going to come to anyway. If you said, oh well, we're not sure about him physically, and then you show the physical data and you show, right, well, he doesn't do a lot of sprint distance, he doesn't do a lot of high speed running, and you're like, right, yeah, that's kind of what we thought. It's very rare where they say, oh, he's not physically, and you go, actually, based off these running stats, he's a monster. But it's like it's only probably backing up the coach's eye. And if it is massively against what the coach thought, the coach would probably come to the same decision anyway. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong. I mean, yeah, I can't see, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're doing it in other places. And like I said, in terms of academy football, I'm really kind of inexperienced. But it's like, stuff like strength scores and stuff like that. It's kind of like you're only backing up what you're seeing anyway, right? So one of the smaller ones isn't as strong as one of the bigger ones, and it's like, yeah, well, we know that. You can see that by looking at them. So I don't know. I might be wrong. There might be people who are saying, yeah, we base a lot of our stuff on physical data or game norms and stuff like that. But I don't think we're there yet. We're definitely not there yet.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Let's move on, mate. Let's go through some of the quick fires that we finished the podcast with. So first one is, who have been some of the biggest influences on your career so far?
Definitely Rylan Morgans. Worked with him at Wales. Tony Strudwick, again, worked with him at Wales. I'm really lucky, like, in terms of just the quality of people you end up working with. Adam Owen, really good. I don't want to leave anyone out. Tom Little, Mark Howard, and then like the gaffer at Burnley, Sean Dyche, was unbelievable as well.
Brilliant. Some decent names in there, mate. Some decent names. Next one. What would you say your biggest strength is as a practitioner?
I think I'm all right on the grass. I think in terms of just, I think getting on with people. I think I'm never too high or never too low with it. I feel like I tend to get good buy-in and a good relationship with the players. And I think I'm fairly relaxed with it. I'm fairly in control. I don't get too flappy or anything under pressure. I think I'm fairly level-headed. Yeah.
Real. And what would be the top bit of advice if you went back to Ronan a few years ago, starting out? What would be your top bit of advice to him?
To be fair, like I've been all right with it, but I always say, like, because my brother's doing a similar role to me at Birmingham at the moment, but I say, like, always have kind of something else going on in the background. So like you see a lot of people who are like doing their job and yeah, brilliant, and kind of that's it. But like, be doing your bases in the background, be doing your UKSCA, make sure you've got something just putting a little bit of pressure on in the background. Like I was probably the other way in that I had like way too much going on in the background, and I ended up like putting myself under a bit of pressure because you're trying to do coaching badges, you're trying to do uni on top of it, and it's like, right, I'm not going to get stuff done here. But it is good because like the time is going to pass anyway. So like, I started me D-Prof when I was at Burnley, and like it just ticks away and ticks away, and you end up now where it's nearly done. Whereas like I could have just gone, no, just focus on the work at Burnley, but we're nearly at the end of it now. So yeah, I'm glad I kind of did that. I'm glad I had something on in the back burner, just keeping me. It keeps you relevant as well because it forces you to read stuff and it keeps you on the ball a little bit. There's
definitely a balance to be found there, though, isn't it? Like you say, maybe early on in the career when you not got as much going on, you can sort of say yes to things, can't you? But then there has to be a line and a balance at some point as well.
Yeah, 100%. Once you get and you have too much on and life gets in the way, done it. But I think earlier in your career, if you front load the start of your career and you get a lot of stuff ticked off, you're in a much better position.
Yeah, brilliant. And tying into that, taking you now to current day, I always ask about CPD, your approach in terms of continual learning. So how do you go about that? What's your sort of approach to that?
What I've started doing, so we've got a lot of interns in this year, and I just tend to dip in and like use a lot of people I know who I know are really good and get to come in and speak to the interns, or potentially like a nutrition intern. The other day I got her on a Zoom with like the nutritionist we had at Burnley. I'll set her up with the one we have here at Wales as well, just so different ideas get floated around. Try and get people into clubs when I can, even though it is quite hard, and just try and link people together a wee bit in terms of formalizing it. Kieran's quite good at that with the interns. He's got a more formal approach, and that it gives him like tasks to do and stuff like that, on that side of things. And then in terms of beyond interns, in terms of other staff, it's just getting them through what we think would be beneficial for them. So Lou, for example, we're torn a little bit between going bases or UKSCA for the moment, and get that pushed through the club. But whichever one it is, and whichever one we decide to be more beneficial for them, we'll do that. And that's basically it. Just talking to people, like it's what find out what they're interested in. If they're really interested in doing their bases, then right, let's do it. Will that be beneficial for the club? Yeah, absolutely. And then I do like the idea of tying in and getting some research done at the club as well, in terms of, right, well, what's the question? What do we want to know? And then figuring out, obviously, what processes we need to go through to answer that question.
Brilliant. You've talked there about the team and staff. What about yourself?
Well, like I'm muddling through my D Prof at the moment, and I'm muddling through my A license. Once I get them boxed off, I'll probably look to do my bases and stuff like that, and then just keep checking stuff off. But that comes from Ryland and Adam Owen, where it's like, when I arrived in at Wales, they both had their PhDs, they both had pro licenses. So I was like, right, this is kind of what good looks like. This is the standard I need to get to. So like when I started at Burnley, I said, right, let's get on I think even when I was at Preston, I might have started my B license. And then when I started at Burnley, I went for the D Pro out of UCLan actually. And just kind of following them and seeing. But that's been really good, because it's forced you to try new stuff and look at different things, and to actually ask the questions.
Yeah. Brilliant. Mate, that was quality.
Cheers.
Thanks a lot for coming on. It's been a long time coming, this one, hasn't it? But it's great to finally get it done.
Yeah, 100%.
Ronan, if people want to reach out, if you've got questions or anything, where would you tell them to go? In the nicest possible way.
Probably me Twitter, Ronan Cav 10 on there, and just shoot me a DM on that or whatever. I'll have the crack, because I love just like chatting sports science with people. Like, it's, to some people it seems boring, like, but it actually is all right.
100%. Mate, thanks a lot for your time.
Cheers, mate. Top man.